What's going on, guys? Dare here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. Today, we are going over the fourth tier in the wide receiver rankings. A lot of really good players in this fourth tier. The fourth tier does consist of the wide receiver 16 through the wide receiver 24. A lot of the players in this range do have wide receiver 1 upside, and any of the players that are being drafted in this range are also going to be day 1 starters for your team. Before we do jump into those players, stat of the day. Yesterday's stat of the day was which quarterback with at least 100 third down pass attempts had the lowest passer rating on third down. The correct answer was Baker Mayfield. As for today's stat of the day, which wide receiver led the league in contested targets? Leave your answer in the comment section down below. We'll be happy to let you know who wins in tomorrow's video. Also, guys, be sure to check out our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. Our draft package is live. The draft, it's going to come before you know it. Make sure you're fully prepared. The tools that we have available in the draft package are guaranteed to help you win your league. So if that interests you, go to our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. Check it out. The link, as always, is in the description box below. Without further ado, though, let's hop right into the video. The first player we have at wide receiver 16 is A.J. Brown of the Tennessee Titans. This is definitely a player who has flirted with being in that tier 3 of wide receivers. I believe we've had him ranked as high as somewhere in the neighborhood of wide receiver 12 throughout this offseason, and his ranking and him falling is more of a combination of the players that we like being drafted around him rising, as opposed to him falling and us not really liking his situation. It's undeniable that he has arguably some of the most upside out of any player in this range. This is a player who in his rookie season was able to compile over 1,000 receiving yards. This was on a mere 84 targets on the season, and A.J. Brown himself is definitely a player to produce highlight reel after highlight reel performances. And while most players see those types of games once in a season, this is definitely the type of player who can string them together for consecutive games. If you take a look at all players through their final 7 games, A.J. Brown actually ranked 3rd in the entire league behind just Michael Thomas and Devontae Parker in fantasy points. His situation coming into this season, there are a lot of commonalities. He's coming in with the same quarterback, a quarterback who he has developed chemistry with, and he should continue to build upon that connection. Meanwhile, the offense and the coaching staff has been very vocal about trying to get him more involved, getting him more volume, and more volume with A.J. Brown, a player not reliant on heavy volume in order to produce at a high level. That presents your team a lot of upside. Wide receiver 17 is Robert Woods of the LA Rams, and Robert Woods is the type of player I feel completely fine with if I do have to head into the season with him as my wide receiver 1. Reason being is he may not have a bunch of upside when it comes to receiving touchdowns, but we do know that his targets and receptions as well as receiving yards are going to provide your team a base level of points in any given week. And if he does get some variance in his favor in the touchdown department, he could easily finish as a wide receiver 1. Through the final 7 games of last season, he was a top 5 wide receiver, and his 2019 fantasy campaign did result in a wide receiver 14 finish, and that was on the back of 2 receiving touchdowns. If this player is able to manage to be somewhere around his career averages when it comes to scores, a wide receiver 1 finish is safely within his range of outcomes. Wide receiver 18 is Terry McLaurin, and this is a player we absolutely adore for the 2020 season. He had a phenomenal rookie year playing on a team that just had no options at quarterback throwing him the ball, yet he was still able to shine. He posted the league's best contested catch rate, and no, that's not best out of all 2019 rookies. That is the best in the entire league, which shows a lot of promise on his individual ability as we head into the 2020 season. He is also the only true receiving threat that this team has, a team that may not be very strong in the defensive department, which may ultimately lead to pass-heavy game scripts in the second half of contests. In other words, plenty of garbage time opportunities. This is also a player that proved to be very successful on the routes that he ran. The only unsuccessful route was a route he only runs 2% of the time, or at least 2% of the time that he did in 2019, so there is a lot of room for potential growth as he looks to take a step forward for the 2020 season, his second season in the NFL. Given that the offense ranked 28th in points per game, it's hard to imagine that the Washington Redskins can perform much worse, and any improvement in offensive efficiency is going to directly benefit Terry McLaurin. Wide receiver 19 is Cooper Kupp, definitely a player loaded with talent, underperformed a bit last season, and for that reason we're seeing him drop in the rankings, but it's not without good measure. Cooper Kupp was seeing less time on the field when this team was running 2 tight end sets, and it's unclear whether this team is going to continue to utilize 2 tight end sets, which may have an overall impact on his play time. As an individual contributor though, he has been very solid while on the field, so Cooper Kupp is definitely a player who could smash this ADP. The overall target market share just has to be somewhat of a concern. From weeks 10 on, Cooper Kupp eclipsed 6 targets just twice, so most of his production did come from touchdowns, and whenever you're relying on a player to produce from just receiving touchdowns without a high amount of volume, that does present a level of risk. It's undeniable that if both Rams receivers do reach their ceiling, Cooper Kupp is the one that would be able to produce more fantasy points, but that is just the risk and the trade-off you'll have to make when deciding between those two players. Wide receiver 20 is Tyler Lockett of the Seattle Seahawks, and this is a player who is being a little bit forgotten in this range. A lot of the players that are going around him have a lot more hype surrounding them, and Tyler Lockett seems to just be the forgotten man. We cannot discredit his connection that he has built with Russell Wilson. He is the most tenured receiver that is going to be getting volume from Russell Wilson, and Tyler Lockett has never been a player who has required a high amount of volume in order to perform. He led the league in red zone targets and red zone receptions for the 2019 season, and when looking for receivers to draft, targeting players who were league leaders in those types of areas are going to be very beneficial for your team. Tyler Lockett himself can be a bit inconsistent week to week, but the overall production you're going to get on him when the season is all said and done, you're not going to be disappointed from what you got for Tyler Lockett compared to what you're paying for him on draft day. Wide receiver 21 is DK Metcalf, and he can easily compete with any of these receivers when we're talking upside. Physically, he's extremely gifted. He's 6'3", 228 pounds. He runs a 4.33 40 and is a 90th plus percentile in nearly every other measurable category. His route tree, it is a bit limited when compared to other receivers in this range, but we have seen receivers like Brandon Cooks have a lot of success for fantasy football despite having a somewhat limited route running tree. It is worth noting DK Metcalf, on the routes that he ran, found plenty of success. He finished the 2019 season with 58 receptions for 900 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns, which definitely shows his ability to perform. His 100 targets is also very promising. Russell Wilson definitely showed a reliance on him when plays did break down, and Russell Wilson being the type of quarterback not fearing scrambling or bouncing plays to the outside and seeing what develops downfield, that's going to fit right into DK Metcalf's strengths. You don't need to be a precise route runner if the quarterback is looking to rely on you in situations where the plays have already broken down. The overall passing volume on this offense is not going to be near the league leaders. This offense still is trying to employ a run-first approach. However, the running backs they're heading into the season with do bring about a bunch of question marks. You have Chris Carson, who is recovering from a hip injury. Behind him, Rashad Penny may start on the pup, and Carlos Hyde, if given the reins to this backfield, is unlikely to perform at least consistently behind this poor offensive line. If this team does go deep into the season with Carlos Hyde leading this backfield, it's more than likely they will have to rely on the pass, giving more volume to DK Metcalf, and Russell Wilson is already one of the best quarterbacks in the league and in NFL history at converting his pass attempts into touchdowns. DJ Chark is coming in at wide receiver 22, and it's really difficult to make a case against him. He was performing as a wide receiver 1 before going down with an injury, and heading into this season, it's going to be Gardner Minshew leading the show, and it's a defense that has definitely taken a step back. It is worth noting that throughout the entire 2019 campaign, they did have Leonard Fournette leading this backfield, which is definitely an upgrade over the options behind him. However, this was the first season that he had actually had health that spanned throughout the entire year, so an efficient run game with an outlet to pass to the running back position may be a luxury that they had in 2019 that we cannot guarantee continues for the entire 2020 season. If Leonard Fournette does go down with an injury and the run game is less effective, they will have to rely more on the passing game, and with a team that already has a defense that's been trending down, that could lead to very pass-heavy game scripts late in games, which could ultimately bring in more garbage points for DJ Chark. Two wide receivers remain in this tier, and wide receiver 23 is going to be Courtland Sutton. Definitely a player we have not been as high on when compared to the other players being drafted around him. We are definitely expecting Drew Lock to take a step forward in this upcoming season, but it just seems like everything did go in Courtland Sutton's way for the 2019 season, so expecting him to replicate it for 2020, even if we do see better play from the quarterback, is still an unlikely outcome. Courtland Sutton was the only real receiving threat on this team. It's also a team that invested heavily into getting Melvin Gordon on their team, which is a clear sign that they want to shore up the running back position, not force the ball into the hands of Drew Lock, and ultimately rely more on their defense to win the games as opposed to the arm. The team also did draft Jerry Jeudy, who is one of the most NFL ready wide receivers heading into this draft class, so Courtland Sutton is going to have more competition for targets this season, especially when you factor in that Noah Fant, a rookie in 2019, showed a ton of promise to be a dynamic playmaker at the tight end position. Don't get it mistaken, we don't have Courtland Sutton listed as a player to avoid. However, we can easily see some weeks not going in his favor if the team is ultimately in a situation where they're leading, trying to run out the clock, and trying to limit offensive mistakes. Even in game scripts that are more pass friendly, Courtland Sutton not being the only talented receiving threat is going to play against him. Overall, it will be better for this offense, but may not directly result in a ton of fantasy production for Courtland Sutton, at least when you compare it to what he was able to do last season. Wide receiver 24, the final wide receiver in this tier, is T.Y. Hilton of the Indianapolis Colts. Now, understandably, T.Y. Hilton doesn't feel like an overall safe pick, but he is presumably the leader on this team from the receiver position on an offense led by Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers has had 7 consecutive seasons, over 4,000 passing yards, and has had no fewer than 508 pass attempts in each season since 2009. Clearly, Phillip Rivers does come as a bit of a gunslinger. His skill set in this area may not be as utilized because the offense is very well rounded. And despite having the weapons on the Chargers in all facets of the game, playing that sort of style did not lead to any wins in the playoffs. That's definitely the aspirations of the Indianapolis Colts for the 2020 season. T.Y. Hilton himself was already a player who could produce wide receiver 1/wide receiver 2 production with a quarterback like Jacoby Brissett. So if this offense does open things up in the passing game, the upside for T.Y. Hilton, it's top 5. T.Y. Hilton does have the illusion of being a risky player because he did deal with injuries last season, but prior to that, in his 7 previous seasons leading up to it, he had played in no fewer than 14 games. This also includes 5 seasons of him playing 16 full games, so not drafting him due to injury concerns, that would simply be a mistake. T.Y. Hilton himself, he's not a player we're particularly targeting, but at the same time, the ranking of the wide receiver 24, it's not very aggressive nor conservative. This is definitely an area he should find himself finishing so long as he can stay healthy. But guys, that's going to do it for this video. We really hope you enjoyed. This is the tier 4 of our wide receiver rankings. Stay tuned for the 5th tier. If you did enjoy this video, how about hitting that like button? If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. We thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.